Hey everybody, my name is Brian and I am the creator of the BMad-Method. This is going to be a long video, but I want to show everything involved with using Claude Code, all the agents, all the options, all within the IDE. This is the first time I've done this, and I want to show you so many details and just how cool some of these features are that I've never demonstrated before in a video, and I've never seen anybody else show some of these techniques also. But there are chapters here, so feel free to jump ahead to the chapter that you need. But honestly, I really suggest watching this through from beginning to end. There's so much good information that I'm going to be sharing with you today that this is just going to be so beneficial for you. You might not be using Claude Code, but there's going to be a ton of information in here. Trust me when I say, if you can follow this, this applies to all of the other IDEs. So install it for whatever IDE you want. A lot of what I'm going to be showing applies to all of them. Also, please give it a thumbs up. It helps the channel. Subscribe. Tell your friends. Share this. Spread the word about this. So many people are using this in their day-to-day lives. People tell me every day they're using this at work. They're using it for so many different things that I never even imagined. Let's dive right in. You always want to come to the BMad-Method and see what's new. If you come to the BMad-Method, this is also the easiest way to get started, and I really do suggest that you start out here. You can come to the README, and you can see here's the link to the YouTube where I'll have this video and other tutorial videos posted. Also, while you're here, if you're a fan of the BMad-Method or if you try it out and enjoy it, I will say come up here to the top and then over to the right of the sponsorship button. There's a star over here. Please click star. This helps other people also find out about this project on GitHub when they're looking for agentic tools and helpers to help take their vibe coding to the next level. And this is going to be showing you how to do a greenfield development of a very simple to-do application. As always, I say take this method and make it your own. This is not meant to be the only way to do it, but it is meant to give you a framework so you can mold it to your own way of working, your own type of project. So you'll want to subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell so you know exactly when that video comes out. But first, let's get to it, everybody. All right, so aside from these links here, if you scroll right down in the README, you're going to see this workflow user guide. This user guide is very simple to follow. You can read this, but if you scroll down, look, there's two diagrams here and they're very easy to follow. This shows you exactly how to use the BMad-Method, whether you're doing it in the web or in the IDE of your choice. First of all, you have a project idea in mind, right? You have two choices. You can use the analyst. The business analyst is here to help you further refine your idea before you go to the PM and start making your PRD. So I'm going to show you how to install the BMad-Method and actually get set up in Claude Code to start using the analyst. And I'm going to show you the optional brainstorming and then also how we create a product brief, which will then make the rest of the flow so much easier. And what's so exciting is you can actually do everything with the BMad-Method now, all within Claude Code, all within the IDE. So if you so choose, you do not have to use the web and the full team stack anymore if you do not want to. I actually enjoy and have had great success using the BMad-Method fully in the IDE, and I'm going to show you how to do that today. Really quick though, we have the analyst, right? And then it's going to go to the product manager, which we will then go to the PO, and then we will come down to the development phase. But take your time really understanding this. It might look complicated, but it's actually a very simple flowchart. This is if you want to use the BMad-Method for a brownfield or greenfield development to take it from ideation all the way to actually developing it in the code. Right now, you see the only thing I have here is the BMad-Method. Now, you do not have to install the full GitHub repo BMad-Method locally. You will only clone that if you want to create your own expansion packs or maybe make changes to the core system or contribute to the project, which I would love, by the way. But you don't need to do that. I'm going to show you how to use the BMad-Method in Claude Code without even cloning the GitHub repo. So first of all, let's create a project. But what we can do is from any directory, I suggest doing it from the dev directory. We are going to type npx, and then we're going to type bmad-method install. We are going to use the BMad-Method 4.33.1. We will just hit enter to accept that. Let's enter the full path of our directory. Since we're in the dev folder, I'm just going to say dot, meaning this folder, and then I'm going to say slash, And now I'm going to put the name of the new directory that I want to create my project in. Since we're doing this from scratch with no starter project, I'm just going to say simple to-do. That's the name of our project. Just a very simple to-do application. And hit enter. It's fine if that directory doesn't already exist. If you're doing this in a brownfield, or if you already have started your project maybe with a template, you'll just give it the directory to your project, and it will add this to an existing project. So then right here, this is a multi-select, but we're just going to go with the default and select the BMad core. The BMad core is the agile workflow AI-driven that we're showing here. So just hit enter. And then we are going to shard the PRD, which means we're going to generate a large document, but then we're going to split it up into smaller pieces. So just accept the default here. And then the same thing with the architecture. The architecture file can be very large depending on what type of project you're building. And so you'll want to shard the architecture into smaller documents. And this is all automated. I will show how this works. But that is really going to help you maximize the context in your agents so they only load what they need. Instead of having to load and read through a whole massive file, they'll know which files they need in the moment to load, and it will help them with their context. So we'll say yes to that. Now here's a warning, and this is just pointing out this is also a multi-select. You can select one or multiple IDEs that you want to install to. For example, let's say that you are a fan of Cursor and Claude Code. Well, you can hit spacebar on Cursor and spacebar on Claude Code. Today, I'm just going to be doing this in vanilla VS Code, so I am only going to be using Claude Code. So I have highlighted Claude Code with the radio button. Make sure that you actually spacebar to hit the radio button. If you just highlight it, like I have right here, right now, and hit enter, this will actually not install it for any IDEs. One other quick tip is, depending on the size of your screen, you might not see all of these options here. So just know that you can arrow up and down and more options will appear, and we're constantly adding more IDEs for support here. Hitting enter. And now this is asking if we want to include the pre-built web bundles. The web bundles are not needed for working in the IDE. This is kind of warning us in case we thought it existed and we typed in the wrong directory, for example. We could choose a different directory location, or we could cancel and start over. But in this case, we're going to say create the directory and continue. Okay, so if we scroll up here, we can see what did it do here. It installed some commands for Claude Code. So these slash commands will be how we activate our different agents. And then we've also installed some commands. And these are great because sometimes we want to do something without necessarily invoking an agent. We are now done. That is the install of the BMad method. I know it took a few minutes to explain it because I was going through the options, but let's see how fast this literally is. I'm going to do it one more time. I'm going to do npx bmad-method install. And I'm just going to give this a different folder this time. So I'm just going to say, let's say .-demo1, right? Just demo1. Enter, 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 enter. Select my IDE, enter, enter, enter. Boom, that's done. 5 seconds and you're ready to go with the BMad method. It's really that simple. All right, and just to see that our two projects are there, if we do ls, we can see that we do have the demo one, the one we just did, and also simple to do. Simple to do is the project we're going to use. So I'm just going to do rm-rf demo one. We do not need that anymore. And now we can see that we have our simple to do. So I'm going to go into simple to do. And I am just going to open up VS Code. Now, right now, we have no project here, right? All we have is what we've installed for our agents under BMad and our custom tasks or commands for Claude Code. And then we have the full BMad core system here. Before we go on, I do want to say one other thing, though, and that is I want to thank everybody that is actually taking the time to buy me a coffee. I've talked to a few of you, and just know how much it really means for supporting me and the BMad method and the community here. So I want to thank everybody that's come and supported the BMad method. And if you would like to, you can go to Buy Me a Coffee, look for BMad Code or the link in the description. Any amount helps, and I truly thank all of you. I like to use Claude Code in the terminal inside VS Code, But it doesn't matter if you use Claude Code outside. You could use it inside the Warp terminal or your own external terminal, Tmux or anything, whatever you want to use. But I just find it convenient to kind of keep it all in here. It's easy to, just have the keyboard shortcut to show and hide the terminal. But we have no other project, right? So as always, if you've used Claude Code, you should know how to do this. You just want to type Claude. And we are going to launch Claude Code. Of course, you will have to have installed Claude Code and set up your authentication, but I'm assuming you've done that. If not, go to the Claude Code website, see how to install it, figure out whether you're going to do the $20 plan, the 100 or the 200, and then you're ready to go. Oh, by the way, I've been talking to a lot of people that have just been using the $20 version of Claude Code. If you're fine not having the Opus model, the $20 Claude Code will actually get you very far depending on how much you're doing. So just say, yes, we do trust this folder. This is the first time we've opened this in a project. You could run the /init command, but I'm not going to do that yet because there's not really anything in this project for it to know about. After we build a little bit of our project and get some stuff in place, that's when I would do Claude init. Well, if we go back to the diagram, we can see that the first person or the first agent that we want to talk to is the analyst, because we're going to do some brainstorming. And if you just hit / if you selected Claude Code in the installation, you're going to see all these options here. And if you don't want to arrow through this list, what you can do is you can just start typing the part of the name of the agent that you want. So for example, analyst, you can just start typing it like that, and it will highlight it. Or if you know what it is, you can just type the whole thing, or you can arrow up and down to the one that you're looking for. So here's the analyst, so we're going to select it. This is how simple it is to use Claude Code with the BMad method. You saw it takes 5 seconds to install, maybe 10 seconds, if you want to read everything. So this is Mary, our business analyst. I know a lot of people think the power in the BMad method is in the development of actual code, but I think Mary, the business analyst, is probably the most special agent in the whole BMad method. If you are just trying to think of something to build, or maybe you have a little bit of an idea, I really strongly suggest that you try using this business analyst with the brainstorming method. This goes beyond software development. You can use this for any type of brainstorming, whether it be in your day job or, life questions. I've tried many different brainstorming tools, including professional brainstorming tools that have been developed by Google. For example, in the Gemini gems, there is a default brainstorming gem that you can use. It's nothing like this. So, let's do that. So we're talking to Mary right now. Mary is active. As always, you can do *help. And so now these are all of the different things that are available to you. Now you can either select a number, or you can type out the name of the command, or you can rely on the fuzzy matching, and usually the LLM will get it right. So I'm just going to select number 5, though, which means brainstorm. And I'm not going to give it a topic. I'm just going to say number 5. Even though Claude Code supports a context window that seems to allow you to go on and on and on without ever getting close to compaction, that doesn't mean you should. So when we're done with the analyst brainstorming, it will give us a brainstorming document. It will save it to a folder called Docs. I will start a new chat. I like to start a new chat every time I have an output document and I'm ready to go. So even if I'm going to talk to the same agent, I will clear Claude or start a new Claude session and then reload that agent and start going. So here we go, though. We're going with Mary. And first, she's going to ask us 4 questions. So we are going to use our Super Whisper. What is this brainstorming about? I would like to create a simple to-do app to demonstrate the BMad method. So this should be a very simple Node.js background application. But what I really want to brainstorm about is some of the ideas we can do to at least make it a little bit interesting. So let's play some of your brainstorming games and see what we can come up with. So we'll let it spit all that out. So question 2, are there any constraints or parameters that I should know about? Well, I already mentioned that we're using Node.js, and I want this to be a very simple, straightforward small project just to demonstrate the BMad method with Node.js and TypeScript. And then we will submit that. So this is how you work with the agent. One of the magical things about the BMad method is it is not just like a taskmaster or some of these other things where you just throw out your idea and then it does all the thinking and working for you. As a matter of fact, what you're going to see with this brainstorming is it is actually going to push on you to get your ideas out. It is going to be your coach. So that is what is special about this. It is not checking your brain at the door and doing it all for you. It is going to work with you, and it's going to bring the best out of both of you. The BMad method, by the way, is all about elevating yourself, learning, and also elevating the LLM. So as a whole, you are both better collectively than each one on its own. That is the special sauce of the BMad method. That's the secret, everybody. Are we aiming for broad exploration of possibilities or more focused ideation? Let's go broad. Let's go crazy. I want to show just what you are capable of as the amazing brainstorming agent that you are. Nothing wrong with flattering your LLM every once in a while. They're sure going to do it to you. Yes, definitely. And that is also the default. But when we're done here, this will take all of our brainstorming and give us this amazing artifact. This is one of the coolest artifacts and one of the most recent additions to the BMad method. This was not even in the original release of V4. I thought this would be a V5 thing, but I love the brainstorming document output, and I think you'll love it too. We haven't gotten to the brainstorming yet, but here we go. You have 4 options here again. So you can pick the techniques, and there's a whole list of 20 brainstorming techniques built into the BMad method. Or you can let the agent recommend it based on your project, or you can do random creative chaos. This one is fun. You never know what it's going to get, but sometimes it picks some of the wackiest ones. Or the progressive creative journey, where we start super broad with wild what-if type scenarios, and there's 5 of those, and then gradually go down to focus. I just want to show you all of the different options that we have here. So let's go to number 1 this time. All right, so here we go. You can see that there's quite a few here, and there's actually more coming in the future. So we have what-if scenarios, analogical thinking, reversal inversion, first principles thinking, the structured frameworks such as the Scamper method, the 6 thinking hats, mind mapping, collaborative techniques such as from the improv world, there's yes and, there's brain writing, round robin, random stimulation. There's deep exploration with the 5 whys, a classic brainstorming technique to really do a root cause analysis. There is morphological analysis, advanced techniques such as forced relationships, assumption reversal, role-playing, time shifting, resource constraints, metaphor mapping, question storming. But with the power of the BMad agent Mary here, she's going to guide you through these and help you come up with stuff that you never even probably imagined. You're going to see how with brainstorming, we can even make a to-do list super interesting and exciting. If we would have selected one of the other techniques up here, those also involve multiple selections from here, and it will work through each of them one at a time. Usually 10 to 15 minutes is what it takes for each one. So this can be a lengthy process. But look, if you're at the beginning of embarking on a really large project or you have some ambitious ideas, it is worth doing this brainstorming to really come up with, super creative, just interesting ideas. Take the time here to build for the future. Let's just pick a couple. Somebody in the community was suggesting that they would love to see 6 thinking hats and also the 5 whys built into the BMad method. And then they realized that they were actually already in here. So just for them, I'm going to select number 6, the 5 whys. So we'll do 11. Let's do role-playing. Role-playing's always fun. So now the agent will remember our choices, and it's going to work with us one at a time. And remember here, we are not asking Mary to brainstorm and come up with this for us. She's going to guide us through this exercise. This is your own personal coach to brainstorm on complex, creative, or interesting ideas. Folks, this is worth, I don't even know what. You can pay experts to teach you how to brainstorm or be your brainstorming coach, and it's going to cost you thousands of dollars, and you're getting this for free. And we're doing all of this in Claude Code, so this is amazing. So, okay, what do we got here? Well, excellent choice. So first we're going to start with the first selection, number 6, which was the 6 thinking hats. 5 ways and then role playing. This is going to generate some seriously creative ideas. And again, this does not have to be about apps. You can brainstorming about everything. Maybe you want to brainstorm ideas for a vacation, or brainstorm how you're going to retire in 10 years, or brainstorm, what you should do with your life, or how you should unscrew up something in your life. I mean, this can be used for anything. It is amazing. But okay, so what are we going to do here? White hat. So the 6 hats, there's going to be 6 different colored hats. So the first hat is the white hat. What factual elements could make your to-do app interesting from a technical data perspective? So think about it. What kind of data could it track? What metrics? What information could it capture that most to-do apps ignore? So I would have never asked myself that question on my own. And I'm already thinking now, wow, I was just thinking a simple to-do app from the white hat perspective. It's now getting me to think about some really interesting aspects of a to-do app. So again, there's no right or wrong answer. And I don't even know if I'm going to come up with anything interesting. This is not the actual product that we're going to create. We're just throwing ideas out there. When we get the report at the end of all of this, it's going to help us distill down what is interesting to then go to the next agent with. I think you could track how much time elapses between when they enter a to-do and when they mark it done. Also, it would be interesting to correlate the length or size of to-dos and the complexity of the to-dos and how that affects how soon the to-dos get done. I love using Super Whisper, by the way, or Whisper Flow, or one of the other many voice-to-text ones. So I'm just going to say yes. And one nice thing about working with Claude Code in the IDE is that as you work through each section of whatever document you're working on, it will start creating the document for you. So you don't have to worry about being lost if you lose the chat, for example. I know sometimes there's anxiety when working with the web agents that you might lose it and it's hard to get the full document out, but here you're building up the document as you go. And we already have our brainstorming sessions here. Now, not too worried about what's in there yet. We're just going to keep going. So now we've gone to the second hat. This is the yellow hat, optimistic benefits. So look, friends, this would take too long to go through all of the brainstorming. So I'm going to go through all 3 brainstorming techniques. All right, and look at this. We got our brainstorming session complete. We did all 3 exercises. Let's now look at the document that it produced. So we will go to Open Preview. This is actually going to give us the output and keep a record of the brainstorming that we did. So first we did 6 thinking hats, critical concerns, creative alternatives, and we found some fun ones in there. And then we went into process control. So it really got me thinking about a lot of different interesting things. This led to so many different things. Then we did the 5 whys. The 5 whys was a lot of fun. The first why is complexity, completion, correlation valuable? And then I gave it an answer. And the answer was because people consistently underestimate how long complex tasks take. And the way the 5 whys works is then it's going to say, okay, well, why is that the case? And then I gave an answer. And then it's going to say, well, why is that the case? Why is that? It's a way to really dig down in a somewhat annoying way, but it's kind of fun doing it with the AI. So then we get into technique 3, which is role playing. This is one of my favorite because the AI will just invent some sort of role playing and you never know what it's going to give you. So here I came up with the overwhelmed freelancer. The context is you're juggling 12 clients, 47 open tasks. You have a current to-do app, multiple of them, making matters worse. So how do we triage intelligence? Show me what actually needs to happen today versus what I think needs to happen. Client workload balance. Visual dashboard showing task distribution across clients to prevent overcommitment. Imagine the project that you really want to launch in the market and what this brainstorming agent can do for you. This is next effing level. Okay, and then it gave us more because I wanted to do more brainstorming. So we didn't just start with the overwhelmed freelancer. We talked about the perfectionist student and what they would get out of a to-do app, the executive assistant, the ADHD creative. So I wouldn't have even necessarily thought of all those personas. The analyst, Mary, helped me come up with these different role-playing scenarios, and we talked back and forth. And then it gives us an executive summary because, okay, so it's great. So we did all those things. We're not going to use all of that, right? Then we kind of talked about what was important to me, and I kind of gave it some of the key insights, and we came up with some of these key insights together. Transforming from task management to behavioral intelligence. Your simple to-do app becomes a personal productivity research lab that helps users understand their actual work patterns versus their assumptions. Tell me that is not powerful. And that is, again, just from like, let's brainstorm about a to-do app. And this is what we came up with together. And now here's what's really cool is it breaks it down into what can we do right now? What might we want to research and do in the future? And then what are like the moonshots or just the creative, ambitious things we want to do later? And again, this could be like any aspect of your life. So use this. Use this in your personal life. Use it for work. You can see now just how powerful the BMad method is, and you don't even need to be in the web. We're doing this all with Claude Code. And as a matter of fact, this is just on the cheapest model for Claude Code. If I do /model, you can see that I'm just using Sonnet. I'm not using Opus, and I'm not using the default. I'm just keeping it on Sonnet. You'll learn over time which model to use. It's kind of an intuition that you'll develop. And trust me, even if you don't consider yourself a strong developer or if you're new to this, you'll pick it up. You'll understand. It becomes very intuitive to know which model to use. So I would recommend, though, just so you can learn that, keep it on Sonnet for most things. We are done with this. We've saved everything to a document. This is the most important thing with the workflow in Claude Code or really any agentic IDE that you're using. We are going to start a new task with either the same agent or a new agent. So what are we going to do? We're going to stop, clear the context. Or if you don't want to clear the context and keep that conversation history for later, we'll just kill the window, start a new one, and restart Claude. Now, you might not know this if you haven't used Claude before. Let's say we close this and then we realize, oh, we're not done with the conversation that we were just in. Well, if you hit / and just hit the up arrow a few times or type /resume, you can now see the chat that we were in here before. So if you've had multiple chats, you'll see a list here. There's only one right now. If you highlight one in blue in this theme, if your theme, it might be a different color. And now we're back in the chat that we were. So that is how you get back to a previous chat. But we want to start a new chat. So again, I'm going to just close that. I could have done /clear, but I want to retain it. So I'm just going to do Claude again. And now we're going to start a new chat. Now we're still going to talk to the analyst in this case. And now I want to show you how to talk to the analyst to do basically the most important thing out of the analyst that you really want is the project brief. By the way, the analyst is a totally optional thing. You don't have to do brainstorming. You don't have to do a project brief. It is something that you can do. Again, it really depends on the complexity of your project and how much you already know. If we were just doing the simplest to-do app, I would go right to the PM, create a PRD for a simple to-do app. You can go right from PRD with its epics and stories directly to development. I will show all of that in the A to B full walkthrough. But right now, I just want to continue showing you this basic path of using Claude Code. So we're going to select number 2 right now. And this is now going to help us create a project brief. And you'll see right there, it loaded elicitation methods. That is one of the other big, awesome things that's built into the BMad method. The BMad method is built up of YAML templates, which have 2 things. Basically, the outline of the type of document, but more importantly, and this is what makes it, I think, more powerful than any other method I've seen so far, but other people are starting to catch on to these ideas. Embedded in the template is instructions for the LLM and how it should work with you. Because as I said a little bit ago, the beauty of the BMad method is not that you ask it for something and it spits out a whole document, but that it really works back and forth with you, coming up with the best possible thing that you guys can come up with together. So first it's asking, do we already have any existing brainstorming results? Market research. Sometimes it's best to look out in the marketplace, see what's out there, and build your own version of it, maybe with your own twist. It's a big market out there, so don't feel like you always have to be the first to market with anything. So maybe you want to do market research and see what is out there, or do a competitive analysis and see what your competitors are doing differently. But what we're going to do is we're just going to take our brainstorming, we're going to drop it here and say, here's our brainstorming session results. We can use this to kickstart our work in interactive mode in creating the project brief. You don't have to use these exact words, by the way, so you don't have to memorize the exact words. Talk to this as if you were talking to your business analyst. Now, this is going to kickstart us. So the nice thing here, too, is we started a new chat, but you're seeing, because we saved it to a document, I'm able to use a brand new context. It's not getting polluted. It only has the output from the brainstorming session. And so it just keeps it lean. And so now it's going to ask us some questions. It's going to pull things out of our brainstorming and probably get us through the PRD a little bit quicker than normal, because you can see here, for example, it already knows what the executive summary is because we've told it when we were doing the brief. I'm only going to show this first section, and then I'm going to finish the document, and then we'll move on to the PM. What you can see is after you complete the executive summary, this is just one part of the overall brief, by the way. It already figured some stuff out from our previous brainstorming. We can correct it or we can tell it to change things. So you'll want to read this and obviously work with it. But at the end of each section, you're going to have multiple options. These are called advanced elicitations. Whether you're working with the PM or the architect or the business analyst right here, every section of a document, most of them will ask you different advanced elicitations related to the document you're working on. Now, unlike brainstorming, where it's asking you, the user, questions, this is where another powerful aspect of the BMad method kicks in. And I haven't talked a lot about this before, so this is very important. But this is where you push on the LLM to do better. When you talk to any LLM, whether you're just using the BMad method or not, or you're just using ChatGPT, if you picture a bell curve, you're kind of getting the average slice of the entire, corpus of information in the LLM. It's giving you the average response. It's, not necessarily great. It's not necessarily weak. The advanced solicitation is your chance to really stick the cattle prod to the agent and say, do better. Make sure that you have put this through the fire and you're giving me the best possible result. Challenge the scope. We can force it to brainstorm. So just like it was having us brainstorm, we can now turn the torture back around on the LLM and have it brainstorm different ideas. There's actually many more advanced solicitations. Again, just so it doesn't overwhelm you, it's just giving some of them. Please do number 4 and number 5. And by the way, while we're waiting for that, notice that it did already start our brief. This is our project brief. So again, the beauty of doing this in the IDE with Claude Code is that we are generating the documents as we go. But first, it did critical assumption testing. So it's basically, by the way, this is just another great thing to do with any product idea that you have. And so I love that the LLM thought about this. Look at all of your ideas for your product and really stress test them and make sure that they make sense, especially if you want to build an MVP first to just get something to market. And then we also did explore alternative solution approaches. So at the very end of it, it kind of synthesizes everything and it gives some recommendations based on what it was doing with itself right there. Sure, this is just a demo. So we're just going to apply them all, update the section, and then we'll move on to the next section of the product brief. Let me say, please subscribe to the channel if you're enjoying this. So much more content is coming out, my friends. I know these videos don't come out as often as I would like to because I'm also constantly working on actually improving the BMad method. I'm not here to just hype up new things, new products, or even sell you on using this, but I do want to be able to use this forum or this platform to share the changes with you. But also I spend a lot of time actually working on this. But subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell so you do know when the next one comes out, because it is a little sporadic sometimes. And join us in the Discord. I'm going to finish this up. We will look at the whole product brief when it's done, and then we'll move on to the product manager. All right, so I'm going to pick up the pace here a little bit. We are done with the brief. We've gone through the whole thing. The brief is now ready for the PM handoff. So before we do that, I just want to show, here's our product brief. Since we're in Claude Code and not in the web, it just keeps updating the document for us. We have the executive summary, the problem statement, pain points, why we're doing this, what is the proposed solution, the target users. So this says like the demographics. Who do we expect to be using this? Why would they use it? How are they each going to use it differently? And why is it valuable to them? This is so important. If you're just wanting to put any kind of product in the market and you're just thinking you're just going to vibe code something, throw it out there and be an overnight millionaire, maybe you will be, but you have to consider all these things. You have to understand the target audience that you're looking for. So that's the beauty of this product brief. It's going to really help you figure out a lot of that and make sure you're building something that makes sense, or might indicate that you want to pivot on something because it's not actually going to achieve what you want to achieve. Why waste a lot of money, effort, and time building something that's not going to go anywhere when instead you can do this little bit of research up front, right? So we're showing this whole document. The point of the product brief is to really work back and forth with it and produce this document that helps you understand what it is you're going to build at a most fundamental level. As always, what did I say? Even in Claude Code, even though we could go on and probably talk to 3 agents in a row, without running out of context, we're still going to start a new one. So again, we can just kill it and start a new Claude session. I'm going to show you a different way this time, and that is just /clear. And this is going to clear the conversation history and free up the context. It's basically the same thing. You could also do compact. I do not recommend it. And if you ever see your IDE is showing you the warning that you're almost ready to start compaction, that means you've been in the chat for too long, and you probably want to wrap up what you're doing. There's different techniques for that to get out of there, but you generally do not want to rely on compaction. It's just randomly going to forget things that might be important. So there's other techniques, but basically, if you follow my method and you just switch and do clear, but sometimes you'll forget, and all of a sudden you'll see that warning, and then you have to adapt. But let's talk to the next agent. So if you don't know what agent to talk to, again, you can go back to the diagram. So we've done this, right? So we talked to the analyst. We've done our optional brainstorming. We didn't do the optional market research or competitor analysis, but you can try those on your own. It depends on what type of project. But we did create our project brief. So now we are going to talk to the product manager. And if we have a product brief, we're going to give it to the product manager. It will actually ask us. So I mentioned you might have a similar or a simpler project. And if you do, or you already know what you want to do, maybe you even already have a product brief, you can just talk to the PM and it will just ask you more questions if you don't provide the brief. But if you provide the brief, it kind of gives it a kickstart and it will get the PRD done much quicker. But it just depends what you want to work. Again, if you're just doing a simple app, you don't have to go through all of this. Just go right to the PM, create the PRD, even tell it you want it to be a technical PRD with architecture built into it. You'll be coding in no time. So there's multiple flows and workflows and ways you can work this system. But again, come back to this diagram if you're not sure. So let's go back to Claude Code. So now again, I hit / here. We could just type PM. That'll take us right to it. If we're not sure, we can also just kind of look through here and then arrow on it. The product manager is going to basically create a PRD, which is a product requirements doc. Building a PRD is important. And also, I'll say the 3 most important things with this PRD is, first of all, it's going to give us all the functional and non-functional requirements and the epic that is made up to meet all of those. So right there, we can see everything that is going to be encompassed by the build that we're planning here. Secondly, it's going to help work with us to figure out what is in scope for the MVP and what we can potentially pull out to have post MVP. Because if you can make your app the simplest version of the app that you can make that will meet the initial goal, that's less risk, less investment in a product. Maybe you want to get it out there with just a minimum set of features to test it in the market. That's why you want to build an MVP or minimum viable product. What is the basic thing of this core? But the PM here will also capture your other ideas, and if they're not part of the MVP, we'll still hold on to those, and those will be post-MVP epics that you might do after the main build. So again, what is most important here? It helps us maintain MVP scope. It gives us the functional and non-functional requirements with the epics. And then the third most important thing, but really kind of the key to the whole BMad method, is in those epics, it is going to create the user stories. But more specifically, it knows that we are creating these for very, very dumb developer agents. Now, as I've said all along with the BMad method, you cannot just check your brain out and leave it at the door and rely on it 100%, right? So we will use the advanced elicitation. We will read the information ourselves and logically think to yourselves, does the story sequence make sense? If you don't see a story, for example, that says scaffold and, set up your project or set up your accounts or whatever you need, there's a problem and something's been missed, right? And usually that should be the first one, like project setup. Learn to kind of spot those things as you go. And there's also some advanced elicitations that will help us discover that. So let's move on here. So we're just going to do create PRD. And I want to show you, before we've been doing the number, we can also just say star, and we can actually just give it the command name also, or you could even speak it. Do notice that there are there's 2 different PRDs here. There's the regular PRD, and then there's the brownfield PRD. Brownfield is a term that you will hear, and you'll also hear greenfield. And I realize some people don't know what that means, so I want to explain it. And it's very simple. Greenfield means like you're looking out on a clean green pasture. It's all open. Pretty much sky's the limit. It's going to be easy to build your foundation. Nothing is there. Nothing is in the way. A brownfield is where all the shit has flowed. It's a cesspool. Maybe it's an existing application that's existed for months or years, or it was developed by other people. Maybe you understand it. Maybe it has a lot of issues in there. If you're going to work with something like that, then you'll want to follow the path Create Brownfield, and that will have a few more steps in it to also provide it the context of the existing application that you might be working on. And number 2, we're just going to do a regular PRD. Now the PM is asking us, okay, do we have the product brief to create the PRD? So again, this will kickstart us to the PRD. If you were starting here, you would say no, and you would just start asking its question. Or you could go back and do it, but we're just going to drag it in because we do have the brief. And we'll say, here you go, buddy. There is a lot of overlap between the product brief and some of the sections of the PRD, but it's really going to translate that from the language of the product brief into functional and non-functional requirements and a few of the other details that we need in there. Okay, so let's see what we got here. So it gave us some goals. So it understands what we're trying to build, why we're building it. We got some detailed rationale here, trade-offs made, key assumptions, and areas needing attention. We have options to do advanced solicitation. And by the way, I love this, just like before. As we produce our document, we are going to generate each section of the document one at a time. So it's always going to have access to everything it's done. It's going to keep kind of a cohesive vision of the document we're building, and it's going to build it up section by section. Beautiful. I love this. Now we are doing section 2. We moved on to the next section. So this is the requirements. So this is going to give us the functional and non-functional requirements. Take your time and read through this. Again, getting this right is important. And you really want to try to look, is there a functional requirement here that you do need or don't need? I want to show you my absolute favorite advanced solicitation to use here. Let's see if it suggests it. But I want to show you how you can actually find what other advanced solicitations are available for the BMad method. But what you can do is you can go to data. We're going to go to data, and here are the elicitation methods. We can see them here. So there's explain reasoning, critique and refine, analyze logical flow, assess alignment with overall goals, identify potential risks, challenge from critical perspective, tree of thought deep dives, hindsight is 2020, the if-only brainstorm, agile team perspective shift. This will take your different agents and have them all look at it from a different perspective. It's a lot of fun. Stakeholder roundtable, meta prompting analysis. So some of these are very creative. And then we get into some of the new advanced 2025 techniques that have been added in recently. Self-consistency validations. The ReWoo, which is reasoning without observation. I love that, ReWoo. Persona pattern hybrid, emergent collaborative discovery, red team versus blue team, innovative tournament, escape room challenge, proceed and no further action. I want to tell you, I've done a lot of research into how to really prompt engineer and get the most out of LLMs. And these are some of the best techniques that I've found from Google and Anthropic. But I've also studied multiple prompting competitions where expert prompters just compete. And I see a lot of them using some of these very cool techniques. And some of these are just crazy fun. So let's pick a wild one. I like the what if only. Hindsight is 2020. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just select this here. This is another thing you can do. Eventually, these will all just be in the menu at one time. Close this now. This looks at all your functional and non-functional requirements. And then it imagines that we've built the application and that we're, I don't know, sometimes it does 6 months out. Sometimes it does a couple years out. And it's an analysis where the LLM does this conversation with itself, reflecting on a board meeting or something else where people are like, if only we would have done this, something would have happened. So let's see what it did here. Imagine it's 6 months from now. The MVP is launched. You're looking back at these requirements. What if only statement might you be making? If only we had. If only we had included basic team sharing features from the start. Non-functional requirement 1 might be unrealistic for a bootstrap budget and single developer. What if we hadn't promised cross-device sync in MVP? Functional requirement 7 adds significant technical complexity. What if we started with single device and added sync in phase 2? So what's going on here? This is actually helping you figure out how to cut scope out of your MVP, keep it a lean build so you can actually get something to market, get it tested, and then layer those features in later. This is the real agile way of product development. Super powerful. So I'm going to say apply changes and update sections, revise the requirements based on these insights. Before you do that, you can talk to it, you can question different things, you can tell it what you want to keep and not keep. But I'm just going to do number 1 for purposes of time. So I'm going to finish this, and I'm going to get this up to the epics and stories, and then we'll continue together. There's only one epic right now because I told it just CRUD. So foundation and core CRUD operation, establish the project setup. As I said, always kind of look out for that, right? We are going to have local database, so it'll do the database initialization, and then implement all basic to-do management commands. Add, list, complete, delete, update. Basic CRUD. So since there's only one epic, it's going to go right into the stories here. So epic, foundation, and core. You'd want to read this. And as always, read the stories and acceptance criteria and think, does it make sense? Is there something being called out that actually relies on something later? This is great. This is how Agile actually works in story breakdown, is each piece of functionality can kind of be its own standalone story. Can we list and search for the to-dos? Can we mark a to-do done? Delete a to-do, update a to-do. You can also ask it questions if you don't see the one you want here and you don't want to look. So I'm going to tell it deep think, please, that the order and granularity of the stories actually makes sense. The sequencing must be perfect with no story dependent on a later story. It's checking to make sure that they all follow the correct progression. You're absolutely right. Let's deeply analyze the story, sequencing, and granularity, as there are significant dependency issues in the current approach. So do we accept it? We'll say yes. So does this sequencing now make sense? So let's say yes. All right, so looks like Claude now thinks we have 7 stories in perfect sequential order. Do we believe that? Well, don't check your brain at the door. Let's close that though, because we're done talking to the PM for now. But you do want to, go through your doc. Imagine this is a big, ambitious project with multiple epics. Do you really just want to accept some slop and move on and start developing? Maybe. But I would suggest take your time and really understand and try to learn from this. Ask the LLM questions. The LLM is not going to always tell you to do this. The reason we have agents and personas is because it's to help you also have a mental model. Not only does it help the agents perform better and keep focused on their domain expertise and, tailoring responses to that persona that they're interacting, but it's also for you to understand that as they are serving this role, talk to them as if they were in that role. So you're talking to a product expert or an architect or a Scrum master. Ask them why they're choosing things. What do different things mean? The beauty of this, too, is you don't have to be embarrassed about asking questions. You can ask this what people might think is the dumbest question. Look, maybe you don't know, maybe you've heard the word database before, but you don't even know what a database is. Okay, you can Google it. It'll give you a definition. But you can also just ask, why are you using a database for a to-do app? It mentioned a name of a database. You could ask it, why did you select this database? Why not something else? And it'll give you an answer. So you can learn a lot just by talking. And at any time, you can just ask the agent questions about this document or any of the documents we're going to do. So now we can start a brand new chat with the architect. So I'm going to open up Claude again. So we're in a brand new cleared context, nothing here. And if you're not sure, you can always clear it again just to make sure. Now we're going to do /architects. Now, again, this is a very simple project. I would probably try to just go from PRD to stories. There is a workflow that supports that, but I want to show you basically how the architect works. So same thing, it'll either show you the commands. If it doesn't, type *help, and you can see what's available here. Now here we have a couple different architectures. Don't be confused, but it's pretty simple. You're either going to do a full stack architecture, which is front end and back end, maybe as a mono repo, which means all the code is in one project, such as Next.js, or maybe it is two separate repos and two separate projects. React for your front end and maybe a cloud service for your back end, and maybe in two different GitHub repos. You also might be starting with a starter project, such as Next.js with Supabase and Shadcm and Tailwind. If you're doing that, you would want to generate your project, get your boilerplate, and share that with the PM or the architect. So as they're doing the architecture, they already know what you have, what your technologies are, what is in your requirements.txt if you're doing Python, or your package.json if you're doing TypeScript or JavaScript. Node.js, excuse me. Create full stack architectures if you're doing front end, back end. Create back end architectures if you're just building like maybe a service project or a utility or anything that does not involve a web front end or a GUI front end. The one exception is you might have a CLI. You will still want to select create backend architecture. And then there is a create front end architecture if you're only working on a web front end. Maybe you're working on a website, or maybe you already have a backend REST API and you just want to build the React app to call that REST API. That's where you would say create front end architecture. And then finally, our friend, the brownfield is back, so we can create a brownfield architecture. And again, that's going to involve a lot of the research that the analyst and the PM did to understand your current project. Feed that into the architecture along with some of the challenges of architecting against an existing project. Creating our backend architecture, because we are doing what? A to-do app only in the CLI. It's just running in the command line for demonstration purposes. So we'll hit number 2. Now, let me give you a tip on working with the architecture, regardless of what actual IDE or system you're using. You want to use the best model you can. I'm showing you that this can be done in the $20 version of Claude Code, but I would recommend, especially on a more challenging architecture, use Opus or whatever powerful model you have, because you will get potentially better results. Or do this in the web with WebGemini, save your credits, and then just get into the IDE after we have our architecture. But I actually enjoy doing the architecture here because, as you can see, yet again, we are producing our document in real time as we go, section by section. It gave us a sequence diagram. It gave us some high-level architecture, what we're doing with the database, how we're going to handle error handling in global installation and uninstallation process. Do we want to focus on any of these? We can do alternative analysis, stakeholder input, risk assessment, resource impact, user experience impact, technical feasibility, market validation. Read what it gave you and think about if any of these make sense or if you want to do any of these. And if not, just move on to the next section. Also, question in this next section what technologies it comes up with. Make sure it knows what the latest versions are or what the best version is. You can also tell it to use the web to make sure that it's considering the latest technologies for everything that it picks. This is going to create a table of all the specific versions and technologies we're using. If you don't have this and tell it what specific technologies, what testing framework you're using, for example, what'll happen is later on your LLM will be developing. It might be using Jest just because it sees that it's already scaffolded, and then it'll run into a problem. And instead of trying to fix it, it might be sneaky and just try to install a whole new test framework without you noticing. It'll tell it, but maybe you're not paying close enough attention, or you walk away and you come back and all of a sudden there's a new test framework or there's another new package. And that's because it's not forcing it to stick to any list. When we create this table here and shard this out to a separate document, the dev agent later on will always be aware of this technology stack and will not diverge from it. It's a very powerful technique to make sure your agents are all using consistent libraries, packages, and versions. So I'm going to go through the rest of the architecture, but just remember, section by section, you really want to use the advanced solicitation. So let me show you right now just one quick example, and then, like I said, I'm just going to kind of run through the rest, and we'll pick up at the end. So let's say in here, doing data models. So this is great because if it makes data models, that means later on the agents, they'll always conform to the same model. And much like our technology stack, you don't want them producing different models on the fly. But let's say for whatever reason, I don't understand why we're creating these, or I don't like them. So I'm just going to ask a question. And this is one thing you can do. You don't need the prompt here always to ask, just ask a question. So say, explain to me the interfaces you created, and I want an explanation of why each one of them exists. And are we missing any? So the architect is programmed to also be very explanatory and explain in a very clear way, meeting you at your level. I recommend talking to all these agents. Even if you're not in the middle of a project, you can load up these agents and just talk to them. Talk to them about your ongoing project. What did he tell us? He told us a lot. So let me explain each TypeScript interface I created and analyze if we're missing any. So the to-do interface, that's obviously important, but why it exists. Type safety. So in other words, an interface allows us to define a object or basically this would be like the blueprint for an object that we will create later. And every object must have a task string completed at, and an ID to make it unique. So why does it exist? Type safety, we just talked about that. Database mapping, so that's interesting. So what that's telling us is he's setting up an interface here that will later also map directly to the SQLite. So we always make sure we have the same properties and fields in our local database. And it's also going to help us define an API contract. The API contract, when it returns a to-do, is going to be guaranteed with each to-do to return these properties. So if we wanted something else in our to-dos, now would be a good time to add it, not later on when we're developing. So that's, again, why you want to actually pay attention and try to understand what the architect is telling you. And if you don't, just ask it. And if you read this and you still don't ask it, play 5 whys with it and ask it why you did this, why you did that. Well, then why did you do that? Well, why did you do that? And on and on and on. Again, you can learn so much just by engaging in discussions with the architect to really start to learn how software is developed in reality. It's very powerful stuff. All right, and so the architecture looks like it is done. We finished the last section. It gave us the final summary, and the document is updated. Let's just make sure that everything is in the document. It's a pretty large document, which is why we shard these documents, but we have our success criteria. Before we shard our documents, just like with the PRD, you really want to go through here and make sure that everything makes sense, such as coding standards. As a matter of fact, coding standards is one of the most important ones because this will be used by the developer agent. Directory structure. You want to make sure that this makes sense. If you want to render sequence diagrams, you can just right-click in VS Code and you can say Open Preview. And then you should be able to see some of these nice-looking renders. If you do not have that option in VS Code or in Cursor or Windsurf or whatever you're in, you'll want to go to your extensions, which is this icon here. These are our installed extensions, and you'll want to make sure that you have something similar to Markdown All-in-One. I like this one, along with Markdown Preview Mermaid. This will give us Mermaid documents, or Mermaid rendering from this one, and the Markdown All-in-One will also let us auto-format Markdown to make sure that it's valid Markdown. Here's our sequence flow. Make sure that the flow makes sense. Here's our database schema. Again, if you don't understand something here, ask it. Ask it why it did this, but this makes sense to me. Here's the source tree that it's going to produce. This controls where the LLM is going to look for files, where it should put them when it creates them. And again, we'll just help it stay on the rail. Having a source tree is a very important document to keeping the LLM on track. I'm going to open up this and I'm going to show you how you can just talk to the agent. In the coding standards, I really want to make sure that the developer agent will use good JavaDoc style comments or JSDoc style comments on all public functions, public interfaces, etc. So please add that to the proper section in our architecture under the coding standards. Okay, that was a little bit wordy, but that's why I like using just the speech to text, because I can kind of work it out in my mind as I'm saying it. And usually the LLM can get it right and understand what I'm talking about. But this should now add some documentation standards, so we will have good, consistent documentation. Now I'm good with this. Now I think the document is great, and we are done here. So now I'm going to close Claude Code. I'm going to close all our documents, and let's look back at our project. We now have an architecture and a PRD, the two key documents that we need. We don't really need the LLM going forward anymore, looking at the brainstorming or the brief. Every file that you keep here is potential context that the LLM might choose to load. You can add restrictions, you can tell it not to, but it's better sometimes to add these to another folder. So you could add these to a project references file, or you could just take them out and store them, or maybe you store them online depending on how you're organizing your project artifacts. But whatever you do, you don't want them to get pulled in and polluting your context overall. Okay, so we'll come back to Claude. We'll use the shard command. So if we just type shard, we will see that there's a task, shard doc. And do we want to use the MD tree? Yes, we do want to do MD tree. So now it's saying, great, the MD tree command is available. If it was not available, it would suggest that you install it. So now I need to know which documents you'd like to shard. Please provide the path to the document you want to shard, and I'll use the mdtree explode command to automatically split it into smaller documents based on level 2 sections. So first of all, we want to do our PRD. So I'm just going to drag it in there. That's it. And the default should be a folder called PRD, which it is. And look at that. It's already done. That's how quick it is. We now have our epic list. And here is the most important one, Epic 1, Epic 2, Epic 3 if there were multiple, with all of the stories, because this is what the Scrum Master is going to use to build up our stuff for our developer. So that is great. So now we can say, do the architecture, and we're just going to drag it in. So as you can see, using the BMad method in Claude Code is super easy. We don't have to jump back and forth to the web. It's super powerful, and it just does a great job at following instructions regardless of which model you use in Claude Code. Here's our architecture, again, just in seconds. And now this is the one that is really good to shard because, look, we have coding standards, which has our documentation and some of our other stuff in here that we wanted with examples. Source tree. So this shows us exactly what our project structure is going to look like. Tech stack. Those three are critical, and I want to show you why so you understand this, regardless, again, of which tool you're using. If you go into Claude, since we're using Claude, we'll look at the Claude version, and let's look at what the developer agent has here. The developer agent has a command in here that basically tells it, look at BMad core, look for the core config, and this is what tells the developer agent what files it will load every time. So the way the developer agent works, I've explained this before, but I'll say it again. The Scrum Master is going to take the high-level epic and story. It's going to read through various architecture documents. It's going to understand one story at a time, and it's going to create a very detailed story for the developer, a lower-level developer story. This is a self-contained file for the developer to have all of the context it needs to build the application. We talked a few videos ago about context engineering. This is the core of context engineering, giving the agent exactly what it needs to build its little piece of the kingdom, right? But additionally, not only is all of this information the Scrum Master is going to put in there exactly what it needs from the architecture and other sources, the developer is always going to load these files that you have listed under dev load always files. By the way, I didn't have to make this myself. This file was created on the install, but if you ever wanted to customize it, maybe there's another file that you always want the dev to load, you can add it here. But again, here's our key documents that were sharded from the architecture: the coding standards, the tech stack, and the source tree. Take your time and really go in there and make updates to those if you need to, and change them if any of these things change. All right, we've come a long way. If you're still with me, thank you for sticking with me. If you made it this far, I would love to know who's actually still watching, because I bet this is a very long video. I hope people are appreciating it, though. So if you've made it this far, how about leaving a comment down below and tell me what is the craziest thing that you want to brainstorm with the brainstorming agent. Give me some of your wildest ideas. And if you actually use the brainstorming agent to do it, come back and tell me one of the craziest things you came up with that you never thought you would come up with before. I would love to hear it. Maybe also jump into the Discord and talk about your brainstorming adventures. As a matter of fact, some people in the Discord actually talked about spending hours just doing brainstorming and coming up with some amazing ideas. We sharded our documents. We have our architecture. We have our PRD. So that is great. Now I'm going to do something here. I'm going to create a new folder that I'm just going to call for now temporarily .ignore. And I'm going to say git init, put everything in there except for the architecture in the PRD sharded documents. And now I'm going to add a .gitignore. So I'm going to say new file .gitignore. I've added a .gitignore file. Please populate it with the common things that should be in a gitignore, and also include the .ignore folder in the gitignore. And the .gitignore, those files should also generally be ignored by Claude so it won't clutter the context. So there we go. So we just populated a gitignore with a lot of common properties. Now, if you're using a starter template or a starter project, it's probably going to set up your gitignore for you. Or if you're using like Next.js, it'll set that up for you. In a complex project, you would want to use the PO at this point. And the PO has a command called run checklist, and it's going to run the PO checklist. What that does is it's going to look at all of your user stories fresh, and it's going to look at the architecture, make sure that they're aligned, make sure that nothing came up in the architecture that needs to feed back into the stories because maybe something changed, or if there's any big gaps. It's a really good idea to do that. Sometimes it'll find things, but this is such a simple app. And like all of the BMad method, it's adaptable. We do not have to do that step. So we're going to skip that. And we're going to jump right to the Scrum Master. Now, if you've never used the Scrum Master, you might not know what it can do. So as always, I recommend doing /help if it doesn't give you the help commands automatically. Sometimes it will. That's just the nature of LLMs sometimes. So we have a few things here. We can draft, which means create the next story. We can do correct course. This is a feature that a lot of people have asked for and don't know exists. Why does my chair keep sinking? Correct course is something, let's say you've developed, halfway through some of your epics, you're mid-project, you're in the middle of a story, and you realize you forgot something or you want to make a big change. Wrap up what you're doing, and then talk to the Scrum Master or the PM, you can choose either one, and run this correct course command. It's going to ask you a bunch of questions, and it's going to analyze how far you've gone and whether it's better to, revert back to a certain earlier stage and produce new stories and epics, or maybe generate new future stories and epics from where you're at right now. Or your change might be so drastic that it just recommends, although it generally shouldn't, that you start over. But not only is it going to give you these suggestions, it is going to help you. It's going to figure out what epics and stories need to be modified or changed or added or removed so you can do this pivot, account for it, and still get to your end goal. Maybe it means making updates to the architecture or, as I said, the PRD. Or maybe you found a new API or a new library that you want to use, so it might put it in the tech stack. All of that's a possibility with the correct course command. That could be a lifesaver depending on the situation. Of course, it's best to avoid that, which is why you go through a lot of planning. What we're looking for here is, number one, we want to draft the first story. Now, if you know what story it's time to draft, just tell it. We know we want to do epic 1, story 1. So what we can do is we can just say, we can say star draft 1.1. So let's say we're halfway through and it's time to do story 2.3 because story 2.2 finished. You can just tell it draft the next story and it will figure out what the next story is. Or you can tell it which one to do. That'll just make it a little bit more streamlined. It'll go faster and it'll start drafting the story that it needs to. When it drafts a story, it's always going to check if there was a previous story. If there was, it will also check if there's any notes in that story that it needs to carry forward into the new one. A lot of times also these project foundations will have steps in them. So you really want to read these stories especially and see if there's any human, basically things that you need to do. Maybe you need to set up an account, or maybe you need to visit a website and provision some infrastructure that for whatever reason cannot be done by the LLM through a command to the remote service. Maybe you have to get out a credit card and pay for something. Okay, so it's done. Let's look at our story and let's see if it followed the proper template. And it's always going to put it in draft mode. This is standard agile story practice. So as a developer, I want to establish the basic Node.js TypeScript project structure so that I have a solid foundation for CLI development. Acceptance criteria means what does it actually take to say, yes, this story is done and complete. The tasks and the subtasks are going to sound a little bit similar to this a lot of times, and it should, because these are the actual steps that the developer agent is going to follow step by step to implement our story. This is where the Scrum Master agent goes through all of the architecture documents, finds information that is relevant to the story, and gives it to it here. Since we're doing project setup, the agent needs to know the structure of our project that the architect came up with. So that's why it pasted it here. So the developer agent has this contextual information and doesn't have to search for itself, loading its own context. So there are placeholders where the dev agent can put notes and also where the QA agent can put their notes. Change this to approved. We are done with the Scrum Master. We're just going to close our context and we're going to start a new one. Because as always, between every step, even though we don't have to, it's better practice and it minimizes the overall context. All right, and now we're here in the home stretch. We got James, our full stack developer, is locked and loaded. Let's do star help. Now you can just tell James develop a story and it will find the highest numbered story that is set to approved or already in progress that maybe wasn't finished by an instance of himself from before. Or you can just tell him. So why don't we just tell him? Then he's not having to do the searching. It will just be more streamlined. So we'll say star develop story. We could have also just told it develop story. We could also just say number 5. Regardless, I'm just going to hit space and then I'm going to drag in the file. And now we should finally see our developer implementing story 1. I figure let's just do the first story and then we'll commit. But we're just going to say yes, let it do whatever it wants to do. It's setting up our package.json. And one thing we can do is as it adds the different packages that we need, as it's going through the different subtasks, we'll make sure that this is aligned. By the way, we could turn on the unsafe mode for Claude and it would just churn through. But for right now, I just have it. I'm sitting here. We're doing this together. I don't mind just telling it, yes, continue. If you want to roll the dice, you can turn off all the safety features and let Claude go wild. And look, we're almost done. It created a bunch of its own internal to-dos mapped to the actual to-dos in the story. And then we should see that it will actually go through. Now it's starting to check them off. We'll set the status to ready for review. So when it does that, you have 2 options. I actually recommend doing both, but it depends on the story. If it's a simple story, probably not necessary. But review it yourself. Maybe test out the functionality, manually check it out. I would start a new context yet again. So we're just going to exit. We're going to say Claude. And now we're going to use our QA agent, which is quality assurance. So let's do star help on Quinn the QA agent. So let's do number 1, and let's pull in story number 1. Again, this is a fresh, brand new context, so it's going to be looking at the story and all of the project source code and other updates that it made to really make sure that it did a good job. So this is going to do a pretty good deep examination. This is another place where you might want to use Opus, maybe even more importantly than when we were doing the development, because this is the critical kind of piece that makes sure that the agent didn't go off the rails and stick files in a stupid place. And it looks like it's already finding some things. This was obviously a very small setup story, so there's not a lot for the QA to do. But it did find a few things, and it gave us these compliance checks that it did here, or improvements that it made. So this is great, right? I just want to say thank you again. If you stuck all the way through this video and made it through here, you're going to be so far ahead of the game. You're going to be a power user using the BMad and understanding the BMad method, especially in Claude Code, I welcome you to come into the Discord forums and give me your shared experience of how it's working for you. Share with the community, or if you have questions still, ask the community and they'll be happy to help you, I'm sure also. It's a great place. We'll see you next time. My name is Brian. This has been a very long episode on the BMad code, but I hope it was helpful and also worth waiting for. So thank you, everybody, and we'll see you next time.